actually using that in the Yardbirds as well. Actually, even when Jeff and I were together, I was using it then. But yeah, I definitely started to concentrate on it more and, you know, get as much out of it as possible. During Zeppelin days.
Particularly that song Dazed and Confused, which was blues, but very Zeppelin blues, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The around that time as well, there was a gig at the Albert Hall, which I saw. In fact, Adrian showed me a little bit of it once.
In other words, it's a bootleg, right?
No, but in fact he wouldn't copy it for anybody, and sent you the VHS. And you had a beard in it. It was a very...
Oh, no, not at the Albert Hall.
No, hang on, pullover. You're wearing a pullover, I think.
If it's a beard and a funny hat and a pullover, that's Bath, and an overcoat, is it? That would be Bath.
That's another one.
Because that was freezing, and I was the only person who owned up and wore an overcoat. No, it's like a T-shirt.
And it wasn't. It was quite early days because you were playing a lot of great.
I don't know if it's the Albert Hall. You see, there's quite a few of these tapes, you know, from different venues. But as they're not out, it's difficult to relate to. I know the first one that we actually did was the Albert Hall, and that was a sort of that included material from the first and second album.
Right, was that your biggest gig in London at that stage?
At that stage, it would have been, yeah. I mean, we always played to sort of a supply and demand factor. So yeah, I think we did a couple of nights there, though, 2 or 3 nights there.
Right, it must have been that's sort of onto the second album. By this stage, Led Zeppelin's a name that a lot of people knew by that time, and it already was conjuring up quite strong images. When people say Led Zeppelin to you, what does the word mean to you? If you could describe it, what Led Zeppelin was?
One of the greatest rock and roll bands in the world, one of the greatest bands in the world. That's what it means to me. I think a lot of other people too.
Yeah, it was very groundbreaking, and you started off in the first album with it. Did you feel a lot of pressure to make the second album better?
No, we went... You see, the second album, once the first album went out, the band was, you know, sort of on the road, and it doesn't stop when you start. You're on the road virtually and working virtually day in, day out for the first 2 years, basically. And we were no exception. And the second album was started in London in the studio, in Olympic, where we did the first one. But it was also done while we were on the road. And some tracks were cut in it while we were in New York, for instance. And overdubs were done in LA. I won't go on and on about this, but to cut a long story short, the energy of the live tour, I think, comes out, or the live touring capacity that comes out in this, and definitely the drive is there. You know, a lot of driving riffs on that one.
There's a real riff feel. I mean, people call you the creator of the riff. How did that whole riff sound?
Well, I certainly didn't create riffs, that's for sure. I think riffs really come from the blues, but I certainly spent a lot of time working on riffs, and I might have created a lot of new insights into riffs that hadn't been employed before.
Well, you took it to a different area altogether.
Yeah.
Which I think is true of your production, particularly Zeppelin 2. It stands out a lot of use of stereo, which no one else really at that time had really explored as much as Zeppelin 2 does.
Yeah, that's right.
Did you really... I mean, you must have worked very hard on that album to get... Because in those days, studios weren't what they are now. It must be very hard to get that clarity.
Yeah, well, it was. But we just played around with the equipment accordingly, and I mean, using phasing and flanging, and now you can just get these things, as a lot of the things that we didn't actually pioneer phasing and flanging, but a lot of the effects, for instance, the drum ambience sounds that we were using, that you can now get from the push of a button, you see. But in those days, you had to get like tape machines and juggle with them, and that sort of thing. But yeah, it was fun and all part of the thing.
A lot more real.
The labour of love.
When you went back to these tapes when you were doing the box set, and went back and heard the original, because you went back to the original master tape.
That's right, the one that was actually, you know, the finished product in the studio, and I think it would get spliced together to make, yeah.
And then sort of all the sub-masters go off. And of course, over the years, like the CDs that originally came out, these ones I've got here, you must have heard them and thought, well, they're not as good as they could be. And
no, well, the whole thing about it is that at the time that we were, well, at the time that I was mixing these things and producing them, it was for vinyl and it was for cassettes. In fact, it was for 8 tracks even in the early days. And obviously with the advent of CD and MIDI systems, and there's a different sort of EQ range within those. I mean, they're much brighter than the old systems used to be. It goes without saying that it would be good to remaster the catalogue of Led Zeppelin, but unfortunately it wasn't done. They were put out, but I wasn't consulted for them, and it subsequently turned out they didn't even use the right tapes. They used substandard tapes, for instance. And I was, apart from that, and there was things were edited out of the tracks and things. At the end of In My Time of Dying, there's a bit. All these things were really annoying, and so when it was proposed that we thought about this 4 CD package, it was a good opportunity to get that side of it right, the sound quality right, and so yeah, that plus the reprogramming of the running order of numbers, I found quite that was a. We'll start this again, actually. Let's start that again.
Talking about the...
In fact, I'm getting very dry, so let's just have a pause.
Right. Yeah, I'm making you talk a lot, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Right, we're on, got as far as Zeppelin 2, and I just gone off at a slight tangent.
I think we both did. Go on. Yeah. We'll put the brakes on and start, yeah.
So we went on to talk about the returning to those tapes for doing the box set.
Yeah.
And I asked you whether, when you went back to those master tapes, you must have thought, you must be amazed at how good the sound was.
The one thing which we did have, which was luck on our side, actually, as far as the tapes went, was the cutting engineer, George Marino, said that he'd worked on some of these sort of packages before, and sometimes the tapes would come in terrible condition. And it was mainly the brand of tape that was being used. It started to disintegrate over the years. Fortunately, we never used any of those brands of tape. So the tapes were really in very good shape. So even like the first album, yeah. It's really quite amazing, really.
It would have been sad if it wasn't that way, because it's such a powerful sound.
Well, I mean, if it hadn't, if the tapes had have disintegrated, I mean, we'd have to have used some of the production EQ masters, which are the next step, you know, in the old days of, so you could send out all these different things to all the different cutting factories. But as it was, we were fortunate we could go to the originals.
Great, okay. We'll return to the box set later. I'm going to sort of move on towards... Well, A Whole Lot of Love is a song that had that great freeform bit in the middle and that amazing guitar solo that comes out of the freeform bit. How did that work out? Did you and Robert and John Paul Jones and Bonzo work that out together in the studio? Do you sit together and work things out like that?
No. The only part that was planned for it was this whole section, allowing for improvisation in the middle. Although at that time they didn't quite know what it was, but I knew that I was going to use this theremin, and that's what it is basically. It's a theremin, and then we start using different treatments on the tape. But at the time, they didn't really know what it was going to be at the end of the day. I mean, I had an idea in my mind how I hoped it was going to work out, which is the way that it did. If it hadn't, I don't quite know what. Might have had to do some editing.
It's got to be one of the best openers for any album, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Were you surprised? Because, of course, Top of the Pops had it as a theme tune. We were surprised CCS covered it and it became the anthem for Top of the Pops for years and years. Yeah,
I know. It was unfortunate. We obviously, when we used to come back and play over here, it was always on, should we play A Whole Lot of Love or not? Because the minute we'd do it, the cynics are going to think, it's Top of the Pops.
Right. Then, of course, we followed that with Zeppelin 3.
Well, I do this. They're both still lasting, aren't they? Both Top of the Pops and Whole Lot of Love. They're still there.
In different paths, though.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what. Yeah.
Because after Zepp 2, which is, I mean, there's a real classic album. You must have been presented with the problem of thinking, how do I follow that?
And this is the one thing that we never did
You just went for it.
at any point. The record company would have liked us to have done something which sounded exactly the same as Whole Lot of Love with different lyrics, I'm sure. But that's not where we were at. We would, whenever we got together to record an album, it was always a summing up of where we were at that point in time. Now, after this sort of 2 years of touring, 2.5 years of touring, well, 2 years we'll say of touring, that was our sort of first sort of lengthy break after that. And Robert and I went to this cottage in Wales and started writing. Now, writing just generally, obviously it was going to be for the next album. We were just writing what we felt comfortable, you know, coming out with. And this cottage didn't have any electricity or anything. It was just sort of gas light and gas cooking. And the only electricity that there was in the cassette recorders and probably what we were generating ourselves between us with this music. But we obviously, you can imagine after all this strenuous touring, in quite a mellow, in these surroundings, right out in the wilderness.
Beautiful.
Quite mellow music started to come out, and we didn't even cross our minds that we wouldn't record what we were writing. We didn't have to think about coming up with a single, for instance, because officially we never put out any singles. There might have been some promotional copies went out. But so that's why, I guess that's one of the key factors of why Zeppelin was able to go into all these different, new ground, or touch new ground within music, because we didn't have to bother about sticking to a format. It was really, what can we do next, you know?
Very exciting, because you didn't...
Yeah.
You weren't looking for like, oh...
No, consequently, that album got a real hammering when it came out.
Yeah, I remember
in the
that.
press, because, and it's, it's quite fair to say that a lot of the albums got a hammering in the press, but I don't think, they just didn't know what we were doing. I suppose a reviewer listens to an album and goes, well, I don't think much of that, because he's listening for something else. He's listening for A Whole Lot of Love. He's listening for Heartbreaker.
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it, it's a great album. It's funny
they
that...
probably enjoy him now. Or they enjoyed him maybe a year later.
How much do you think that was due to the fact that it was your third album, and reviewers, particularly in this country, when a band's been around for a while, they think, well, they're quite big now, let's try and be negative about it. I think there's a lot of that in this country.
Yeah, they don't learn, do they, reviewers?
No. Yeah, we won't go too much into that. The album cover, of course, was completely new as well. How much did you have to do with the sliding disc inside the set?
Oh, we had the idea for the sliding disc, because if you remember those old gardening calendars and things,
yeah,
things would appear in windows. It didn't come quite the way that we'd hoped it would, actually, and that's about the only piece of artwork that where we didn't. The artist went away, and we had trouble trying to get to sort of tie in with him to see how things were going, and it was virtually presented at the end of the day. But I mean, it was all right. But it's not one of. I don't think that all the rest of the band would say it's not one of the favourite covers, for sure.
Of course, now as a CD, the whole revolving thing's lost as well. It's just a white thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame that this is the sort of thing that you lose. I mean, for instance, Physical Graffiti album covers. I think that's a really successful one in this sort of gadgetry type of domain. And as we all know, so much is lost in that. A lot of the artwork is lost.
Yeah, the CD that's the only bad thing.
But that's the only thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's what you find. I mean, if you're doing these sort of things, when they're, being, re-released or whatever, or in our case, remastered and re-released. This is it, because it was originally made for a different market.
That's a good thing about Led Zeppelin, is a lot of us already got the album covers anyway, so you can now put those in the frames and listen to the brilliant sounds on the CD.
Yeah.
How did you get that Jimmy Page guitar sound? And what was it? What were you using in those days on 1, 2, and 3?
On the first album, I had an amplifier called a Supro amp, which is about this size, a 12-inch speaker in it, a distortion unit, and a wah-wah pedal, and a Fender Telecaster, and that was it.
All that was just that?
Yeah, really. Of course, there was the acoustic guitar as well, but I didn't have one. I borrowed one at the time. That's the truth, I did.
On that first time,